12-year-old Marcus had always been a curious boy who loved exploring the old forest behind his grandmother's cottage. And on this particular summer afternoon, something strange was about to change his life forever. The sun was setting behind the tall oak trees, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and purple, when Marcus noticed something he had never seen before. A small golden light was flickering between the bushes near the ancient stone well that everyone in the village said was cursed. "What could that be?" Marcus whispered to himself as he slowly walked toward the mysterious glow, his heart beating faster with every step he took. His grandmother had warned him many times to stay away from that old well, telling him stories about people who had disappeared near it long ago. But Marcus was too curious to listen to those warnings today. As he got closer, he could see that the light was coming from inside the well itself, and he could hear a soft humming sound that seemed to call out to him in a language he could not understand, but somehow felt familiar. Marcus leaned over the edge of the well and looked down into the darkness, where he saw something that made him gasp in surprise. There was no water at the bottom, only a swirling circle of golden light that seemed to be alive. "Hello?" he called out, and his voice echoed back to him in a strange way, as if someone was answering from very far away. The golden light began to grow brighter and brighter, and Marcus felt a warm wind rising up from the well, carrying with it the sweet smell of flowers and the sound of distant music. Before he could step back, the light reached out like a hand made of pure sunshine and gently wrapped around him, pulling him forward over the edge of the well. Marcus screamed as he fell into the golden swirl, but instead of falling down, he felt like he was floating through warm water, surrounded by colors he had never seen before, and sounds that made him feel both scared and excited at the same time. After what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, Marcus landed softly on a bed of purple grass, in a place that looked nothing like the forest he had left behind. He stood up slowly and looked around with his mouth wide open in amazement, because everywhere he looked, there were wonders that seemed impossible. The sky above him was painted in 3 different colors at once: pink on one side, green in the middle, and bright blue on the other side, with 2 suns shining down and making everything sparkle like diamonds. Trees with silver leaves grew all around him, and their branches held fruits that glowed in different colors, red and yellow and blue, like lanterns hanging from strings. Small creatures that looked like butterflies with human faces flew past him, giggling and whispering to each other as they pointed at his strange clothes. "Where am I?" Marcus asked out loud, and to his great surprise, one of the butterfly creatures stopped in front of his face and answered him. "You are in Luminara, the hidden kingdom beneath the old well, and we have been waiting for someone like you for a very long time," the tiny creature said, in a voice that sounded like tiny bells ringing. Marcus could not believe what he was hearing, and he rubbed his eyes to make sure he was not dreaming, but everything was still there when he opened them again. "Waiting for me?" he asked, feeling confused and a little bit frightened now that he realized he had no idea how to get back home. The butterfly creature nodded its tiny head and smiled, showing teeth that sparkled like pearls in the strange light of the 2 suns. "My name is Twila, and I am a flicker, which is what my people are called in this kingdom. And I have been watching the well for many years, waiting for the human child who would come to save us from the darkness." Marcus shook his head, unable to understand what Twila was telling him, because he was just a regular boy who liked to read books and climb trees, not some kind of hero who could save magical kingdoms. "I think you have the wrong person," he said, taking a step backward and almost tripping over a rock that seemed to move out of his way on its own. Twila flew closer to him and looked deep into his eyes with her own eyes that were the color of liquid silver. In her bell-like voice, "You carry the mark of the old ones, young human, and even if you do not see it yourself, we can all see it shining inside your heart like a flame that never goes out." Before Marcus could ask what she meant, a loud horn sounded in the distance, and Twyla's face changed from happy to frightened in an instant. "We must hide right now," she squeaked, grabbing Marcus by the ear with her tiny hands and pulling him toward a hollow tree nearby. "What is happening?" Marcus asked, as he squeezed into the small space inside the tree trunk, with Twyla pressed against his shoulder. "The shadow soldiers are coming," she whispered, her whole body shaking with fear, "and if they find you before you reach the Crystal Palace, all hope will be lost forever." Marcus peeked through a crack in the tree trunk and saw dark shapes moving through the silver forest. Creatures that seemed to be made of smoke and shadows with glowing red eyes that searched every corner of the land. His adventure had only just begun, and already he was hiding from monsters in a world he did not understand, wondering as he would ever see his grandmother's cottage again. As the shadow soldiers passed by their hiding spot, Marcus made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to help these strange creatures, and then find a way back home, no matter how long it took or how dangerous the journey would be. And somewhere deep inside his chest, he felt something warm begin to glow, as if Twyla had been right about the flame that burned in his heart all along. Marcus and Twyla waited inside the hollow tree for what felt like hours, barely breathing, as the shadow soldiers searched the silver forest around them with their terrible red eyes. When the last of the dark creatures finally disappeared into the distance, Twyla flew out of the tree and looked around carefully before waving for Marcus to follow her. "We must move quickly now," she said in her tiny voice, "because the shadow soldiers will return when they realize they missed something, and next time they might look more carefully." Marcus climbed out of the tree trunk and brushed the strange purple moss off his clothes, still trying to understand everything that had happened to him in such a short time. "Where are we going?" he asked as he followed Twyla deeper into the silver forest, stepping over roots that seemed to wiggle like snakes and around flowers that turned to watch him pass. "We must reach the Crystal Palace before the 3 moons rise," explained, pointing toward a distant mountain that sparkled like it was made entirely of glass. "Because that is where Queen Seraphina lives, and she is the only one who can explain why you were chosen to come here." The path through the forest was unlike anything Marcus had ever walked on before. It changed colors beneath his feet, turning from purple to blue to green with every step he took. Strange sounds filled the air around them, some beautiful like singing voices, and others scary like growling beasts hiding in the shadows between the silver trees. "What happened to this kingdom?" Marcus asked after they had been walking for a while. "Why are those shadow soldiers looking for me?" Twyla landed on his shoulder and let out a sad sigh before beginning to tell him the story of Luminara. Long ago, this kingdom was the most beautiful place in all the hidden worlds, where everyone lived in peace and happiness under the rule of the kind kings and queens who protected us with their powerful magic. Marcus listened carefully as they continued walking, dodging around mushrooms that were taller than houses, and across bridges made of solidified rainbows. But then, 100 years ago, something terrible happened. A prince named Malachar became jealous of his sister, who was chosen to be the next queen instead of him. Twyla's voice became quieter as she continued the story, and Marcus could feel her trembling against his neck. Malachar went to the Void Mountains in the north, where it is said that dark magic sleeps in the caves, and he made a terrible deal with the Shadow King who lives there. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, even though the air around them was warm and pleasant. "What kind of deal?" he asked, though part of him was afraid to hear the answer. Malachar promised to give the Shadow King half of Luminara, if the Shadow King would give him the power to take the throne from his sister, Twyla said, and the Shadow King agreed, turning Malachar into a creature of darkness and giving him an army of shadow soldiers to command. They had reached the edge of the forest now, and Marcus could see a wide field of golden grass stretching out before them, with the crystal mountain rising up in the center like a beacon of hope. For many years, Queen Seraphina and her people have been fighting against Malachar and his shadow army, but they grow weaker with every battle, while Malachar grows stronger. Twyla flew off his shoulder and hovered in front of his face, her silver eyes full of both sadness and hope. The ancient prophecy says that a human child with a pure heart will come through the old well when Luminara needs help the most, and that child will carry a light inside them that can destroy the darkness forever. Marcus shook his head again, feeling overwhelmed by everything he was hearing. "But I am just a regular boy," he protested. "I do not know any magic, and I have never fought anyone in my life, except my cousin Thomas, and he beat me easily." Twyla smiled at him, which looked strange on her tiny face that was both like a butterfly and like a person at the same time. "Say you must be a warrior or a wizard," she explained. "It says only that your heart must be pure and brave, and we can already see that you have both of those things, even if you cannot see them yourself." Before Marcus could argue any more, he heard a sound behind them that made his blood turn cold. It was the howling of the shadow soldiers, and they were getting closer. "Run!" Twyla screamed, and Marcus did not need to be told twice. He sprinted across the golden field as fast as his legs would carry him, with Twyla flying beside him and pointing the way toward a small gate at the base of the crystal mountain. The howling grew louder behind him, and when Marcus dared to look over his shoulder, he saw a wave of darkness pouring out of the forest like smoke from a fire, with dozens of red eyes glowing in its depths. His lungs burned and his legs ached, but he kept running, driven by a fear he had never known before, and a strange new courage that seemed to be growing inside him with every step. The gate was getting closer now, and Marcus could see guards standing on either side of it, creatures that looked like knights made of crystal, with swords that glowed with white light. "Open the gate!" Twyla shouted, as loud as her tiny voice could manage. "Chosen One is here, and the shadows are right behind us." The crystal guards looked at each other for a moment that felt like forever, and then they raised their swords, and the gate began to swing open with a sound like music. Marcus pushed himself to run even faster, his feet barely touching the ground, as the darkness reached out behind him with fingers made of shadow and cold. He dove through the gate just as it began to close, rolling across the crystal floor on the other side and gasping for breath. The gate slammed shut behind him with a tremendous crash, and he could hear the shadow soldiers screaming with rage on the other side, unable to pass through the magical barrier that protected the palace. "You made it," Twyla cheered, flying in circles around his head with joy. "I knew you could do it. I just knew it." Marcus lay on his back and stared up at the ceiling above him, which was made of pure crystal that caught the light and broke it into a prismatic display, shining and shifting as he blinked in the light. 1,000 different colors. He was inside the Crystal Palace now, and he was safe for the moment, but he knew that his adventure was far from over. Somewhere in this magical place, a queen was waiting to meet him, and she was going to tell him how a regular boy from a small village was supposed to save an entire kingdom from an army of shadows. As he slowly got to his feet, Marcus noticed that the warm glow in his chest had grown stronger, and when he looked down at his hands, he could swear he saw a faint golden light shining beneath his skin. Maybe Twyla was right after all. Maybe there was something special inside him that he had never known about before. Something that had been sleeping until this moment, waiting for the chance to wake up and shine. The inside of the Crystal Palace was even more beautiful than Marcus could have imagined, with walls that sparkled like diamonds, and floors that reflected his face like perfect mirrors. 2 crystal guards escorted him and Twyla through long hallways decorated with paintings that seemed to move, and statues that followed them with their jeweled eyes. "I have never been inside the palace before," Twyla whispered excitedly from her spot on his shoulder. "Only the most important creatures in Luminara are allowed to enter, and I am just a simple flicker from the outer forests." Marcus felt nervous as they walked, because his clothes were dirty from rolling on the ground, and his hair was messy from running so fast, and he did not think he looked like someone who should meet a queen. They finally stopped in front of 2 enormous doors made of solid gold, with symbols carved into them that Marcus did not recognize, but which made him feel both peaceful and excited. "The Queen will see you now," one of the crystal guards announced in a voice that sounded like wind chimes, and the golden doors slowly swung open to reveal the throne room. Marcus stepped inside and immediately forgot to breathe, because sitting on a throne made of pure light was the most magnificent person he had ever seen in his life. Queen Seraphina was tall and graceful, with hair that flowed like silver water all the way down to the floor, and eyes that changed color every time she blinked, from blue to green to gold and back again. She wore a dress that seemed to be made of captured moonlight, and on her head sat a crown of tiny stars that twinkled and danced with her every movement. "Welcome to Luminara, young Marcus," the Queen said in a voice that was warm and kind, and Marcus wondered how she already knew his name. "Your Majesty," he managed to say, remembering the stories his grandmother had told him about how to act in front of royalty, and he bowed as low as he could without falling over. The Queen laughed gently, and the sound filled the room like beautiful music. "Please, there is no need for such formality," she said, gesturing for him to come closer. "You are a guest of honor in my kingdom, and I have waited a very long time to meet you." Marcus walked toward the throne on legs that felt like jelly, with Twyla flying beside him and looking just as nervous as he felt. "I do not understand," Marcus admitted when he was close enough to see the kindness in the Queen's ever-changing eyes. "Everyone keeps telling me that I am special and that I was chosen, but I do not know why or how I can possibly help you." Queen Seraphina stood up from her throne and walked down the crystal steps to stand right in front of Marcus, and he was surprised to see that she was not much taller than he was. "Let me tell you a story," she said softly, "a story about a prophecy that was made long before you were born, long before your grandmother was born, and even long before her grandmother was born." She waved her hand, and suddenly the air around them came alive with moving pictures made of light, showing scenes from long ago. "When the first humans discovered the old well in your world, they made contact with our kingdom, and for many centuries, humans and the creatures of Luminara lived together in friendship and helped each other in times of need." Marcus watched as the light pictures showed humans and magical creatures laughing together, sharing meals, and building beautiful things side by side. But as time passed, fewer and fewer humans could see the magic anymore, and eventually the connection between our worlds began to fade, until the well became just an old stone circle that everyone avoided. The pictures changed to show the well sitting alone in the forest, covered with vines and forgotten by everyone. "Returned to your world," she spoke with our greatest seer, a wise old creature who could see things that had not happened yet. The Queen's voice became more serious now, and the pictures showed an ancient being with a face like wrinkled paper and eyes that glowed white. "The seer told us that one day, when Luminara faced its darkest hour, a child would come through the well with a heart of gold and a light inside them that matched the light of the first dawn. Queen Seraphina reached out and placed her hand gently on Marcus's chest, right where he had been feeling that strange warm glow. That light has been passed down through generations of your family without anyone knowing it existed, waiting for the moment when it would be needed most. Marcus looked down at where her hand rested and saw that golden glow again, brighter now than it had been before. "But what am I supposed to do with it?" he asked, feeling more confused than ever. Removed her hand and sighed, and for the first time Marcus could see how tired and worried she really was beneath her beautiful appearance. "My brother Malachar has found a way to bring permanent darkness to Luminara," she explained. "He is building a machine in the Void Mountains that will block out all three of our suns and cover the entire kingdom in eternal shadow." Twyla gasped in horror, and even Marcus understood how terrible that would be for a world where everything seemed to depend on light. "The only thing that can destroy his machine is a light brighter than our suns, a light that does not come from this world." She looked at Marcus with hope and desperation in her rainbow eyes. "Your light, Marcus, is the only thing that can save us." Marcus felt the weight of everything she was telling him pressing down on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. "But I do not know how to use this light," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I did not even know it existed until today." Queen Seraphina nodded understandingly and took his hands in hers, which were soft and warm like sunshine. "That is why you must train before you face my brother," she said. "I will teach you how to find the light inside yourself and how to let it shine when you need it most." Marcus looked at Twyla, who was nodding encouragingly with her tiny butterfly face. "Will you help us, Marcus?" the queen asked. "Will you stay and learn to be the hero that Luminara needs?" It was the biggest decision Marcus had ever faced in his entire life, and he thought about his grandmother back home, probably worried sick about where he had disappeared to. But then he thought about all the creatures in this beautiful kingdom who would suffer if the darkness won, and he thought about the warm light in his chest that seemed to be saying yes with every beat of his heart. "I will help you," Marcus said finally, surprised by how strong and sure his voice sounded. "I do not know if I can really be the hero everyone thinks I am, but I will try my best." Queen Seraphina smiled, and her smile was like watching the sun rise after a long night. "That is all anyone can ever ask," she said, "and sometimes trying your best is exactly what it takes to become a hero." She turned to the crystal guards, who had been watching silently from the doorway. "Please prepare the training grounds," she commanded. "The Chosen One has much to learn, and we do not have much time left before my brother completes his terrible machine." As the guards hurried away, Marcus felt excitement mixing with his fear, because even though he did not know what the future held, he knew that his adventure was about to become even more incredible than anything he had experienced so far. The next morning, Marcus woke up in the softest bed he had ever slept in, surrounded by pillows made of clouds and blankets that sparkled with tiny embedded stars. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming, but then Twyla flew through the window and landed on his nose, and he remembered that everything that had happened was completely real. Wake up, Twyla chirped happily. "Today is the first day of your training, and the queen is already waiting for you in the Garden of Lights." Marcus jumped out of bed and looked around for his clothes, but instead of his old shirt and pants, he found a beautiful outfit laid out for him on a crystal chair, a tunic made of silver fabric that changed color when he moved, and boots that felt like they were made of soft butter. "You look like a proper Luminaran now," Twyla said with approval, as Marcus finished getting dressed and looked at himself in a mirror that showed not just his reflection, but also what he had looked like when he was younger, and what he might look like when he was older. They hurried through the palace halls, past crystal servants who bowed as Marcus passed, and paintings that whispered good luck to him in voices he could barely hear. The Garden of Lights was the most amazing place Marcus had seen yet, filled with flowers that glowed in every color of the rainbow, and trees whose branches were made of pure golden light. Queen Seraphina was waiting for him in the center of the garden, standing next to a small fountain that sprayed not water, but thousands of tiny glowing butterflies. "Good morning, Marcus," she said with a warm smile. "Are you ready to begin discovering the power that lives inside you?" Marcus nodded, even though his stomach was full of nervous butterflies that had nothing to do with the fountain. "The first thing you must understand," the queen began, walking slowly around him in a circle, "is that the light inside you is not something separate from who you are. It is you, the very best parts of who you are, made visible." She stopped in front of him and looked into his eyes with her ever-changing gaze. "Your kindness, your courage, your love for your grandmother, your curiosity about the world. All of these things are what make your light shine." Marcus thought about her words and tried to feel the warmth in his chest, which had been quiet since he woke up. "But how do I make it come out?" he asked, holding up his hands and staring at them, as if expecting light to shoot from his fingers. The queen laughed gently and shook her head. "You cannot force it, just as you cannot force a flower to bloom or the sun to rise. You must let it happen naturally, by being true to yourself and feeling your emotions deeply." She turned and pointed to a small dark stone sitting on a pedestal nearby. "That stone has been touched by shadow magic," she explained, "and it will only turn back to its true color when pure light touches it. I want you to try to make that happen." Marcus walked over to the stone and looked at it closely, seeing how its surface seemed to swallow light instead of reflecting it. He closed his eyes and tried to feel that warm glow inside his chest, thinking about all the things the queen had mentioned. His grandmother's smile, his curiosity about the magical forest, his desire to help the creatures of Luminara. At first, nothing happened, and Marcus started to feel disappointed and embarrassed. But then Twyla flew over and whispered in his ear, "Think about the happiest memory you have, the one that makes you feel warm all over whenever you remember it." Marcus thought about the time his grandmother had surprised him with a birthday cake she had made herself, covered in his favorite frosting and surrounded by candles that seemed to glow brighter than any candle should. He remembered how loved he had felt in that moment, how safe and happy and thankful for everything he had. And suddenly the warmth in his chest exploded outward like a sunrise happening inside his body. He opened his eyes and saw that his hands were glowing with golden light, soft but steady, like two small suns floating in front of him. "I am doing it," he shouted with amazement. And in his excitement, the light flickered and almost went out. "Stay calm and focused," the queen instructed gently. "Feel the emotion, but do not let it overwhelm you. Guide the light with your heart, not your mind." Marcus took a deep breath and thought again about his grandmother's love, and the light steadied in his hands like a candle protected from the wind. He walked slowly toward the dark stone, his hands stretched out before him. And when the light touched the surface of the stone, something magical happened. The darkness seemed to melt away like ice in warm water, revealing a beautiful crystal underneath that sparkled with all the colors of the rainbow. "You did it!" Twyla cheered, flying in excited loops around his head. Even Queen Seraphina looked impressed, clapping her elegant hands together with genuine joy. "That was excellent for your first try," she praised him. "Most people take days to produce even a small spark, but you have already created a light strong enough to cleanse shadow magic." Marcus looked at his hands, which were still glowing faintly, and he felt something he had never felt before. Pride in himself, real pride for something he had accomplished. "But I must warn you," the queen said, her voice becoming more serious. "My brother's darkness is much stronger than that small stone, and to defeat his machine, you will need to create a light brighter than anything you have made today." She paused and looked at him with concern in her shifting eyes. "The brighter the light you create, the more it will cost you. Using this power takes energy from your body and your spirit, and if you use too much at once, you could hurt yourself very badly." Marcus felt some of his excitement fade as he understood the danger, but he did not let it crush the determination growing inside him. "I understand," he said, "but I am willing to take that risk if it means saving Luminara." The queen nodded slowly, respect showing on her beautiful face. "Then we will continue training every day until you are ready, but we must move quickly. My scouts tell me that Malakar's machine is almost complete, and once it starts working, we will only have a short time before the darkness becomes permanent." For the next 7 days, Marcus trained harder than he had ever worked at anything in his life. He learned how to call the light whenever he needed it, not just when he felt happy, but also when he felt brave or determined, or full of love for the people he wanted to protect. He practiced making the light into different shapes: shields to protect himself, beams to cut through darkness, and gentle glows to heal creatures who had been touched by shadow magic. Twyla was with him every moment, encouraging him when he felt tired, and cheering for him when he succeeded. And every night, Queen Seraphina would visit him in his room to tell him stories about the old days when humans and Luminarans worked together. Stories that made Marcus feel connected to something bigger than himself. By the end of the week, Marcus could create a light bright enough to fill an entire room, and the warm glow in his chest had become a constant companion, always ready to burst forth when he needed it. "You have learned well," the queen told him on the final evening of his training. "Tomorrow, we will march to the Void Mountains and confront my brother before it is too late." Marcus looked out the window at the 3 moons rising over Luminara and felt fear and excitement battling inside him, like 2 warriors. Tomorrow, everything would change, and he could only hope that his training had been enough to make a difference. The army of Luminara gathered at dawn, filling the crystal courtyard with creatures of every shape and size. Tiny flickers like Twyla, tall crystal knights, fierce warriors made of living flame, and gentle healers whose bodies seemed made of flowing water. Marcus stood beside Queen Seraphina, wearing armor that she had given him, lightweight crystal plates that allowed him to move freely while protecting him from shadow magic. "Are you ready?" the queen asked, her rainbow eyes fixed on the dark mountains in the distance, where storm clouds gathered like angry ghosts. Marcus took a deep breath and felt the light humming inside his chest, warm and steady like a faithful friend. "I am ready," he said, and he meant it with every part of his heart. The march to the Void Mountains took most of the day, through the golden fields and past the silver forest, into lands that grew darker and more twisted with every step. The grass turned from gold to gray to black, the trees became bent and scary shapes without any leaves, and the air grew cold enough to make Marcus shiver. Beneath his armor, "We are entering my brother's territory now," Queen Seraphina announced, her voice carrying to every soldier in the army. "Stay close together, and let no one fall behind." As they climbed higher into the mountains, the shadow soldiers appeared like smoke rising from cracks in the ground, their red eyes glowing with hatred and hunger. The battle began with a tremendous clash of light against darkness. Crystal knights swung their glowing swords, cutting through shadow creatures that screamed and dissolved into black mist when they were struck. Fire warriors threw balls of flame that lit up the battlefield like shooting stars, while water healers rushed to help anyone who fell wounded. Marcus stayed close to the Queen, using his light to create shields that protected nearby soldiers from shadow attacks, and beams that carved paths through the enemy ranks. But for every shadow soldier they destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place, and Marcus could feel exhaustion starting to creep into his bones. "There are too many of them," Twyla cried from her spot on his shoulder. "We cannot defeat them all." Queen Seraphina looked toward the peak of the mountain, where a massive structure made of black iron stood against the stormy sky. "We do not need to defeat them all," she said with determination. "We only need to reach that machine and destroy it. Marcus, are you ready to do what you came here to do?" Marcus nodded, feeling his light grow brighter inside him as his determination strengthened. "Twyla, lead the way to the machine," the Queen commanded. "I will stay here and hold back the Shadow Army while Marcus does what must be done." "Your Majesty, I cannot leave you alone," Marcus protested, but the Queen silenced him with a gentle hand on his shoulder. "This is my kingdom and my responsibility," she said with a sad smile, "and you have a more important job to do. Now, go, before it is too late." Marcus turned and followed Wally up the mountain path, running as fast as his legs could carry him, while shadows reached out from every side, trying to stop him. He used his light to push them back, creating a golden barrier around himself that burned any darkness that touched it. The machine was enormous up close, a tower of black metal covered in glowing red symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat, and standing in front of it was a figure that made Marcus stop in his tracks. Malachar had once been handsome, Marcus could tell, but now he was barely recognizable as the Queen's brother. His skin was gray as ash, his eyes burned with red fire, and shadows swirled around him like a living cloak. "So you are the human child everyone has been talking about," Malachar said, in a voice that sounded like breaking bones. "How disappointing. I expected someone more impressive." "I do not need to be impressive," Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "I just need to be bright enough to destroy your machine." Malachar laughed, and the sound made the air grow colder. "Foolish boy, even if you could create enough light to damage my machine, it would cost you everything. Is this kingdom worth your life?" Marcus thought about Queen Seraphina fighting below, about Twyla who had been his friend since he arrived, about all the innocent creatures who would suffer if the darkness won. And he thought about his grandmother, who had always taught him that helping others was the most important thing a person could do, even when it was hard or scary. "Yes," Marcus said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "It is worth everything." He closed his eyes and reached deeper inside himself than he ever had before, past the warmth in his chest, past his happy memories, down to the very core of who he was. He found all his love there. Love for his grandmother, love for his new friends, love for a magical world he had only known for a short time, but had already come to care about deeply. And he let it all out at once. The light that exploded from Marcus was brighter than anything Luminara had ever seen, brighter than the 3 suns combined, a wave of pure golden energy that swept across the mountain like a tidal wave. Malachar screamed as the light hit him, his shadowy form dissolving piece by piece as the darkness that had consumed him was burned away. The machine groaned and cracked, red symbols flickering and dying as the light poured into every part of it, overwhelming the dark magic that kept it running. With a final tremendous explosion, the tower collapsed into a pile of melted metal, and the storm clouds above began to clear for the first time in years. Marcus fell to his knees, completely drained of energy, barely able to keep his eyes open. "Marcus!" Twyla cried, flying to his side, with tears streaming down her tiny face. "You did it! You saved everyone! But please do not leave us! Through his fading vision, Marcus saw something amazing. Where Malachar had been standing, a man was slowly rising to his feet, no longer gray and twisted, but looking confused and frightened, and somehow younger. The queen arrived moments later, having seen the light from the battlefield below, and she ran to her brother with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Malachar," she sobbed, embracing him gently, "you have come back to us." The dark magic had been completely destroyed, and without it, Malachar was just a man again. A man who had made terrible choices, but who now had a chance to make things right. Queen Seraphina rushed to Marcus and cradled his head in her lap, pouring her own healing magic into his exhausted body. "You wonderful, brave, impossible boy," she said through her tears. "You gave everything you had, but I will not let you go. Luminara owes you a debt we can never repay." The healing took many days, and Marcus drifted in and out of dreams where he saw his grandmother's face smiling at him and heard Twila's bell-like voice telling him stories about all the celebrations happening across the kingdom. When he finally woke up completely, he found himself back in the soft bed in the Crystal Palace, surrounded by flowers and cards from creatures all over Luminara who wanted to thank him. "You are awake," Twila squealed with joy, flying around his head so fast she was just a blur. Queen Seraphina entered the room with a smile that seemed to light up the whole world. "You have been asleep for 2 weeks," she said gently, "but the healers say you will make a full recovery. Your light did not burn out after all. It just needed time to rekindle." Marcus placed his hand on his chest and felt the familiar warmth still there, smaller than before, but steady and growing. "What happens now?" he asked, wondering about his grandmother and his home world. "That is for you to decide," the queen replied. "You can stay here as long as you want. You will always have a place in Luminara, and the well will always be open for you to visit." Marcus smiled, knowing exactly what he wanted to do. "I need to go home and see my grandmother," he said. "But I will come back to visit, I promise." And so, 3 days later, Marcus stood before the well once more, with Twyla on his shoulder, and Queen Seraphina and her healed brother standing nearby to say goodbye. "Thank you for everything," Marcus said, hugging the queen one last time. "No, Marcus," she replied softly. "Thank you for showing us that true light comes not from magic, but from the courage of an ordinary heart." Marcus stepped into the well and felt the golden light wrap around him once more, carrying him home to his grandmother's cottage, where an incredible story was waiting to be told. And in his chest, the light continued to glow, a reminder that heroes can come from anywhere, and that the greatest power of all is simply the ability to care deeply and act bravely.